This week on the Jochum Strength Podcast, we have on Joe Pedulla. Joe is a strength coach at the University of Oklahoma and offers private coaching as well. Throughout the episode, we talk about building a social community through meaningful content, picking stimulus and adaptations over specific exercises, and self-training for the Apex competition happening in the very near future. This was an awesome episode that truly displayed Joe's passion and knowledge for performance. As always, thanks for listening and enjoy the episode.
Before we hit the intro music, I wanted to introduce to you guys the Jochum Strength Insider. The Jochum Strength Insider is our online training platform that takes all of the ideas that we talk about on this podcast and implements them into a program that is available to you at the touch of your fingers. Our goal with the Jochum Strength Insider is to create better movers, to level up your life, and to move forward from where you are. We do this in a holistic fashion. Not only will you receive a program that has helped hundreds of people become better movers, you'll also receive access to our app that allows you to track everything, has video links for all exercises, and allows you to be in constant communication with a Jochum Strength coach. Along with this, you'll get our 30-page PDF nutrition and lifestyle guidelines. That includes everything from what to eat, how much of it to eat, why we're eating it, meditation habits, and other lifestyle habits that we implement with our clients to really level up their lives. If you're interested in trying out one of these programs, use Podcast 25 in the discount section right before you pay for 25% off your first program.
Boom. This is the Jochum Strength Podcast. Take the leap down the rabbit hole with us as we interview elite level guests to unravel what high performance really is.
All right, well, Coach, welcome to the podcast. Excited to have you here.
Appreciate it, Austin. I've been looking forward to speaking on this podcast for a while, actually. I didn't think you'd notice my page.
Dude.
I've been following you for a while.
So my litmus test right now of bringing somebody on the podcast is if Will or Blaine talks about you, or Tim talks about you in the podcast, and you had the trifecta in a week, dude. I listened to a Blaine podcast, he mentioned you. I listened to a Will YouTube, he mentioned you, and I listened to a Tim podcast or post or something like that, he mentioned you, and I was like, God damn, who is this guy? So I had to go check him out, and now we're here. So I'm pumped. You passed that trifecta. Some people get one good word. You got three.
That is a great rite of passage to get on the show. I love that.
Yeah, I know, dude. And dude, anytime I'm like, those three people, if those three people like somebody, like, I just feel like they're so real, like they're not going to bullshit you about anybody. You get an intern from those three, you're going to do good. And even better if you get a podcast guest or somebody a little bit higher up in the totem pole. But if they give the rite of passage, I will trust it. But you just crossed 20K followers on Instagram. Congrats, dude. That's dope.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. It's been the last year was the fastest growth I'd ever seen. I've obviously tried a lot of new things with my content and tried to make it a little bit more authentic. I think that's like the biggest thing that's helped me, honestly, is just being more raw. But it took so many years to like actually get some traction. So it feels good to be rewarded for a lot, all those posts and like all the thought that I put into my posts. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. It was just a hobby years and years ago, and now it's obviously something that's exploded in my face, and I'm just trying to find my way as I go. I don't really have a plan.
Yeah, dude, that's dope. I want to know, did you have like a light bulb moment with the content? Because this is something like we do a lot of consulting with people, and most of it's just because I had the same exact journey of you. It was like I was kind of just putting out thoughts and working on it. And then like it felt like it got to a point in which like I felt like I knew what I was doing. You know what I mean? Or like I knew what I was creating finally. And it takes so long to get that, dude. I bring myself back to like early content creation days, and like I would fight myself all day on like, what the fuck do I say today? And like the best thing I did for myself was like I made myself post. Like I just forced it, but it was forced to start. It was so hard to like actually come up with a creation piece. And now that like I look back on it, like how easy it is for me. It's like I don't even realize. It's almost like learning how to squat for the first time. You don't realize when a new athlete comes in, it's their first time squatting. You like, oh, like that's actually what it was like for us as well. Like, did you have a moment like that where you're like, okay, this is what I need to be saying and doing, and like it feels good now?
Yeah, well, for a long time, I think when people take to social media as a coach and they start, they start putting out content to try to acquire clients. Like I feel like everyone starts with athletes. Like I'm just going to program for athletes and sell programs and try to market myself in that respect. And then like people tend to find their way as they go. I didn't really have the time or energy to do a lot of remote training, and I did. And I also like studied the way that I spoke on my posts, and it was always educational. And like what we know about athletes, like short attention spans, they don't really care much all the time for like the why. Some people want to be just entertained, and like that's not the demographic that I'm really targeting. Like everything that I was saying was really educational and directed to people that were doing exactly what I was doing. So it was just being more self-aware. And also like, I don't read business books, but like I look at like a lot of YouTubers that talk about business, and I follow some business coaches, and like something that stuck with me is like pay attention to your message, like what have you been saying and who have you attracted? So that's been a big thing, is just understanding that most of my following is coaches, and then it got more like targeted into like the education side of what I'm doing now, and like creating courses, creating a community, and things like that. So it's just been more like a process of being more self-aware over time, and that really clicked like a year and a half ago, not even.
So one thing I think is a fourth litmus test for an ath or a person coming on the podcast too is somebody who trains themselves. I think that's pretty important too, and that's one thing I noticed on your page was a lot of your training, and I think it might have been in your 20K post saying it started out as a way to like journal what I'm doing, journal my habits and all of my tendencies going forward. Do you see like a new direction that that's going to go in? Because it has been pretty awesome to see someone training for specific events, somebody moving forward, and then just if you go back in time, how it's changed and how it stayed the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm always going to be training with a goal. I think that that's what makes strength and conditioning coaches. It's like there's a distinction between working out and training, and I would rather be on the side of history that tried new things and experimented and like actually developed anecdotes that you can't replace with reading, or reading research or whatever. Like new things are discovered by doing. And then if those things stand the test of time, like that's how knowledge is created. That's like one of my favorite concepts from, I don't know if you guys have read The Governing Dynamics of Coaching by James Smith. That's like one of my favorite concepts I got from that book, is like knowledge is created when something new is positioned in the field, and then it stands the test of time. So like I would rather be the guy that's obviously adhering to principles, and adhering to like true physiological laws, and like how to do things in a structured way, but also embracing a lot of variability and experimentation, and kind of like forming my own system, from like a not like a hodgepodge, but like a nice healthy mix of a lot of different systems that you might see, like this new concept of like the neurological training, like the Olympic lift school of thought, like all these different triphasic, like whatever kind of system you want to think about, and whatever kind of bias some coaches have, just finding a nice blend, is what I think makes a coach like a really good coach, and someone who could handle like more adverse and difficult challenges with athletes, and just be more agile.
Dude, and it, like we're talking about a field where like a lot of the big heads in the field, like their big revelation, this is one of the things that drives me nuts, is like you have to sprint to get faster. You know what I mean? Like 10 years ago, that was a massive revelation in our field. And it's like, bro, how like locked into our fucking little bubbles are we that that becomes a revelation? Like aliens would look down on us and be like, "What are you guys how do we not know that? Like what are we talking about here? Like how is this like a big piece of information?" But when you have so many people where it's like coaching tree on coaching tree, like carbon copies, and a lot of it is like if you do, and I think there's a lot of fields, but like if you step out of that coaching tree or you step out to experiment with something, you are instantly labeled as a like guru type person, as a movement yogi, as like
Right.
something along those lines. And rightfully so for some parts. Like I think part of it is if you are an explorer, like you want to label yourself as an explorer, you want to label yourself as a creative, you have to understand the weight that you're going to bear, because there are like there's a reason that stigma is around, because there are people like Goda out there, like there are people like functional patterns out there that they do take that new idea, something that maybe started off in a good thought process and a way to explore a different way of moving, and then they just took it and turned it into a cult. And it seems like that happens a lot, rather than finding something new that could work, it could have potential, and then plugging that into things that are like already working, rather than just going full cult mode.
Yeah, yeah, people, I mean, you hit the nail on the head right there with what I was going to say next. Like people overcommit. And when you overcommit, like it really hurts your ability to get outside your box and be a better problem solver because that's just such a valuable skill that you have to have. It's a prerequisite, I think, for coaching and at least my setting, like in the collegiate setting where things are just so hectic, like you have to be able to change things up and bring a new idea to the table for a very unique situation. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's all I want to say with that.
And what is
I
your
think you
litmus
summed
test
it
of
up.
like ideas working and ideas like worth trying? Like, how are you doing in like our age of information where we are spammed with 2,000 new ideas a day? Like, you have to have some sort of like bullshit meter. Otherwise, you do end up like some of the young coaches getting trapped in some of these things. And I don't even think it's a bad thing for some of these young coaches to get trapped in some bullshit training program as long as they come out on the back end, right? Like, you're going to have to go through some Seedman ATG type program at some point and be like, oh my God, like, what the fuck was I stuck in? But at least you like learned something from that process. But what's your litmus test and like how do you go out this process of, oh, that's interesting, oh, this might work, oh, this is an idea I want to keep?
All right, so I'm going to give you a real life example from something that I experienced last night. Okay, so on my community, we have guest speakers, and Jared Slater came on. He owns IHT Performance in Charleston, South Carolina. I don't know if you've seen them. They're like
Welty and
real.
Brian are running one of his programs right now.
Yeah, yeah. So he's in like that neurological training school of thought. I don't know if you know Jared Burton. Like a lot of these guys are taking like a top down, meaning like brain controls everything approach. And you see these guys on Instagram like doing like 5 minute isometrics for in like very weird positions and like for different limbs and in different positions. And it's like sometimes it looks like randomness. And it's like, how are you programming that? Like, how do you know to do that? Or like, what's the thought process behind that? And I had him on because I was like, I just want to hear what this guy has to say about this because they seem so confident in it, but it doesn't seem like culty, and which is like a skill you kind of just develop like over time, just hearing people talk and like being well read yourself. You kind of just have like an intuition about what sounds like you should explore it or not. So he comes on and he's talking about how you could have like a cerebellum issue where like you can have like hypertonicity on one side of your body and like decreased tone in a different part of your body, and he went through like the reasons why, and it had like a lot of like factual um like roots to it when it comes to like neurology and just like how neurons work and how tone works and how like Golgi tendon organs and muscle spindles work. So he was like, okay, if you have a muscle that's too toned, you're gonna do like drop catches or fast stretches for it to get it to like inhibit its hypertonicity. So like if you can construct an argument that is like predicated on actual like physiology or biology or neurology, whatever it is, like I'll entertain it. And also like if at the same time you're entertaining the principles that we've known forever and the basics, like those things never go away. You're just kind of sprinkling in this other stuff to attain better function. So like I know I didn't go too deep into what Jared actually said, but that's kind of just like a rough like 30,000 foot view of like what he said, and like just the idea of taking something and superimposing it on top of what we already know is legit hard and beneficial training, and just leveraging it for better performance or better recovery or better function overall. So I think if you see someone who's just doing away with what everyone else is doing and they're just like completely neglecting it and saying it's not important, like that's weird to me. Um, so I think that sums up my thoughts with that.
Yeah, and dude, that's funny. I just got the question. I just answered this on YouTube 2 days ago, but they were asking a question like my thoughts on just ISOs and just like drop catch training, like where it's only that. And I'm like the like Jay Schrader, the Tommy John type approach. You probably put Dak in there. You probably put Snyder in there, like that kind of group of people. And one of the things that I was mentioning is like there's a difference between just doing that because you saw somebody do it on Instagram and then also and having a program built behind it like somebody like Dak does or somebody like Tommy John. Anyways, I was just asked a question on the YouTube about the alt drops and the ISOs and like only doing those things. And I was talking in the program and in the YouTube video where there's a big difference between like using those methods just because you saw them on Instagram and then talking to somebody like Dak or talking to somebody like Tommy John who like their deep philosophical like understanding and reasoning for doing those exercises is so vastly deeper than a lot of these people that are just like adopting the exercise. And you realize like it has nothing to do with like the method, it's how they combine the method into their soup and how they make their soup together. And once you
Exactly.
talk to them, and again, like you were saying, like that's one of the best things about the podcast is it's such like a litmus test of do you know what you're like, is there anything below the 10-second reel that you have out there? And you find out really quickly when you talk to those people, like, oh, they know what they're talking about. And there's a reason, just because it looks weird, like you talk to them, you're like, there's a reason for the things that they're doing. And I think when we look at different and creative ways and out there ways of training in quotations, you really have to have that conversation with that coach and seeing like what does their soup look like? How does it taste at the end? Like that's what matters. I don't care if they use onions or carrots, like what's it look like at the end?
100%. Yeah, I agree completely. It's all like everything is a tool, and like I just find it so hard for me to like hear someone out when they just do away with very simple things that have like, solid merit, like functional patterns. Like I feel like they don't approve of 99% of the things that we're doing. And like there's just such a strong track record of success with a lot of the things we're doing that I find it like hard to trust someone who would ignore all of those things.
Yeah. And
So
the
that
anybody that
that
does the snake oils, like you got injured because of this, like it's 100%
I
of the time, like that person's full of shit.
that's the worst part. That's the worst part is like you using a example of like someone you don't even train or you don't even know what went into their training, and you're just like from the outside positioning yourself as someone that knows what's going on when like it's random, it's you really can't predict for it. I like the common saying now people are saying like if you could predict for it, then you'd be able to, predict when it happens or how. Like we would have figured that out by now. It's just too chaotic to do any of that.
Yeah, and there's the other thing. It's like there's billions of dollars going into these sports. You're telling me if you had the answer, you wouldn't be getting paid at least a chunk of that billions of dollars? I'm like, yeah,
Right.
it's like it just doesn't add up math-wise. Like, guys, if you had the answer, you would be getting paid a lot of money, and you wouldn't have to make a singular Instagram post on any of this because somebody would pay you a ridiculous amount of money.
That's a good point. Yeah. You'd be working for the NFL.
Yes.
One thing I saw, I think, on your page a while ago is, and it kind of ties into all of this, is being married to exercises. And I feel like that's going right along with this is people get good in exercise, especially if the coach happens to be good at it themselves. And they're like, this is the tool to do bilateral pushing of the lower body versus being like, hey, I have a team or I have athletes that need to get a certain physical trait or attribute trained and I can train it through a variety of ways. Like, let's find the best way that works for the team with the equipment that I have in the season they're in. And I think you've done a pretty good job of doing that. And could you explain some of your methodology besides like not getting married to a singular exercise for that?
Yeah, so I don't look at the exercise, I look at the parameters around it. So I'll give you an example. With a bilateral squat versus a split squat, okay, a split squat's going to have more time under tension. You're going to be under the bar more. Um, it's probably going to be a little more fatiguing, even though the system load is a little less because you're spending more time under the bar and you're completing more repetitions. I look at a bilateral squat as something that's output based. Like in my system, I use unilateral exercises more for like our GPP foundational like muscle building block, because you're gonna get more, I think, muscular involvement overall, and you're also gonna, like I said, like the set's gonna be longer. You're going to trigger metabolic pathways that signal for hypertrophy. And your overall time under tension, I think that's one of the biggest things is going to be better. And you're also going to promote more movement options. So in GPP, like something that I focus on is layering in as much variability as I can, whether that's in the form of exercises or like degrees of freedom. So in a single leg exercise, you are going to experience more like helical motion and rotation around a joint. You're going to experience more sacral motion. You're going to experience more pelvic motion. And that I think is a favorable thing to pursue in GPP instead of like always using a bilateral lift where like the sacrum, the pelvis is super, super rigid to stabilize because it has to stabilize to produce force. So that applies to hinging as well, like landmine RDLs, single leg RDLs, whatever kind of single leg variation that you want. You're promoting more degrees of freedom, I think, and like more variability around a joint and more joint stability as a result. So that's one thing that I take into consideration. So I'm looking at like overall system load, the output that it affords you. Okay, so like if we're in season, I'm probably not going to do 4 sets of 5 of, Bulgarian split squats. I might do like 4 doubles or 4 triples, whatever it is, of like a pin squat, or maybe it's a normal back squat. Like if we're early in the year, we still have to train pretty hard to survive like a 6 month long season. So like there's going to be a time of the year where like we are doing deep range of motion strength training. That's another thing. What's the range of motion? So like you can manipulate a bilateral squat with tempo, with depth, with repetitions, with intensity, with internal effort, um, like things like that. So it's about manipulating the parameters around it and the loading prescription. Um, and how the exercise is executed way more so than like the name of the exercise or just the most basic rudimentary form of it. I'll give you like another solid example here. Like I have athletes who are super, super fast who don't do well with compressive exercises. I'm sure you guys have experienced this. Like you have a long levered athlete, they have long legs, they've got stiff ankles, and squatting is kind of a disaster. And because of how short my GPP phase is before my team starts fall practice, I want to pick the lowest barrier to entry exercise I can possibly find for that person that they could load immediately. And I have a screening process that I go through to do that. It's a very simple process. It's a questionnaire and just watching them perform a couple movements. Not like an FMS or anything like that, but it's looking at posture, it's looking at their pelvic function, things like that to determine like what are they going to be good at? What's like the most likely thing that they're going to be good at that I could load them on right now? Um, and this year, like this fall, was the easiest time I ever had prescribing exercises, just having a system to do that. And everyone's like doing quite well with the exercises that I gave them. And like, my retrospective idea of like what I thought they were going to be good at is what they're excelling at. So like going back to the fast athletes who have maybe longer levers, they're posterior chain dominant, maybe they present with anterior tilt, like I'm going to manipulate their exercise selection a little differently than someone who's maybe a stockier, shorter individual who does well with pushing and overcoming inertia, like an acceleration. That's what acceleration is. Your first step, you're overcoming inertia. Your body's at a dead stop. You have to move dead weight in the forward direction, and that is predicated on producing a ton of horizontal force and a lot of horizontal power, and it's a muscular driven task. So a lot of my elastic athletes are actually not as good accelerating, but they're super good at top speed. What I want to do to preserve that top speed performance is not force a ton of dorsiflexion over the ankle and increase their ankle mobility. I don't want to compress them super super deep in a squat. I want them to be stiff. I want them to be strong in a upright position. So trap bar deads, unilateral exercises, split squatting, pin split squats, I think I already said trap bar deads, pins, like any kind of pin squat variation, and then just like superimposing a lot of plyometrics on top of that. When the acceleration dominant or muscular dominant, whatever category you want to bucket them in, like they might have more of like a high force dominant program where we are spending more time in deep ranges of motion. Like their CNS thrives off it. When you take it away, they don't perform as well. More loaded jumps, longer ground contact plyos, while also supplementing some of the faster things that they don't excel at already, but never like ditching the things that they're super, super good at. So that was a long-winded question or answer to your question there.
One other thing, kind of in the same realm that I like to ask coaches who work with team sports is obviously there's going to be a big variance of abilities. There's going to be a widespread of abilities of people in the weight room specifically. And so there's going to be people who don't excel at lifting versus people who excel at lifting. What's your methodology to like exercise prescription for people who are good versus not good, especially like an incoming freshman? Some freshmen just come in and they have hardly any experience in the weight room versus that fifth year senior who's been running a program with you for 5 years. How do you vary the exercise selection based off of that just technical experience of lifting as a skill?
So I mean, if I had a team that let's say I had a team that I like never saw before, like brand new team, let's say it's like my first year in it, like I would run through my questionnaire that I do in my screening process, and like one of those questions is like, what are you used to doing? Like what you got to tell me what you've done. And I talk to like every single incoming freshman that I've ever had. I contact their coaches from back home if they have one. I ask them for their contact information. I ask what they've done, how long they've been doing it, the things that they don't prefer. So I have some information leading into it. So that's number one. If I have an athlete who's never done anything, like I'm probably going to start more basic, like with dumbbells. Like instead of a barbell hinge, we're gonna do dumbbells, just because the overall system load is less and it's easier to teach. If we're doing a squat, maybe it's a landmine squat, maybe it's a safety bar squat right off the rip. I like a safety bar squat because it allows athletes to travel like really, really well in the vertical plane. Um, so it's a constant conversation. I don't know if I have like a set in stone like way to select an exercise. I'll give you another example, like with foundation groups, instead of moving straight to barbell lunges or barbell Bulgarian squats, I'll start them on dumbbells. Like if you're not exhausting the dumbbell loads, like if you can't dumbbell Bulgarian 60 pounds in each hand, like I'm probably not going to put you on a safety bar Bulgarian. So like trying to squeeze as much juice as I can out of the basics and delaying the progression as long as I can, is I think the main reason I do that is to, like, the longer you delay progress or delay the progression, the longer you're going to see progress for. But like if you rush to the next step and you add all this intensity super super fast, when the athlete doesn't need that much right now, that's where you stagnate and you don't see the progress that you should with a newbie lifter.
Mhm. One of the things that you mentioned was talking about how it's the easiest you've ever been able to program. And that sounds like the light bulb moment I had a couple years ago too, where like I finally figured out the actual parameters and the actual stimulus that I wanted to program. And once I figured out like programming based off stimulus, programming based off like movement problems and like having a category, having buckets that I wanted to hit, the methodologies and the tools that I used became the easiest part of the programming. And I think that's something like when somebody looks at a program that has a high amount of variety or you're pulling from a lot of different sources, they get really lost in how do I plug all these things in? How do I work on all of these different aspects? How do I progress all these different aspects? And you even went so far to like talking about programming like internal focuses and like different tempos. What does like when you sit down to program, you have the sheet of paper, you have the Excel sheet in front of you. How are you setting out those parameters so that the methodologies and the methods that you're using are kind of the easy part and you're able to make sure you're hitting all of the things that you want to hit when you're drawing from it? Because I think that's something that a lot of people, it's like kind of the range approach where you have all of these different sources of information, which is an amazing thing to where you can make your own program, but it comes a little bit more complex when you haven't mastered what your program looks like and what your parameters and your philosophies in the middle, like what those are, and you kind of get pulled certain ways. You're like, oh, maybe do I focus on this? Do I focus on this? Like, what does that actually look like when you're sitting down in front of an Excel sheet?
So I'll give you a little nugget from Mladen Jovanovich's book. I don't know if you've read the Strength Training Manual for Coaches. It's like that orange and black cover book.
Oh
But
yeah.
there's a ton of like solid philosophical principles in that book, and it was the spawn of like this thought process that I have, which is explore, develop, exploit. Explore, develop, exploit. Like that's like the order of operations I go through in an off season. The explore phase is your GPP. So like I again maximize movement options, embrace variability, and like a ton of range of motion, cover as many bases as we can as far as like degrees of freedom go in an athlete, and like as many accessible positions that they can access, like get as strong as we can there. The develop phase is actually layer on the development of physical qualities on top of range of motion you've accessed or any kind of like learning you've acquired or any skills you've acquired. So, that's like your intensification period. And like there's tools to do that. So, like instead of doing, your unilateral exercises where you can't push intensity as hard, like you just deliver an exercise where intensity is more accessible, or like that exercise affords the athlete to do that thing at a higher level better. Um, I'll give you an example with like eccentric strength. So like in that explore phase, like we're doing a lot of like low level braking in a lot of different directions. So like change of direction drills, altitude lands, but like not super high yet, lunge drop catches, lateral lunge drop catches, like as many variations as I can think of to increase like the amount of positions an athlete is comfortable decelerating in. And then like during our intensification, okay, we're going to layer on a ton of eccentric strength. Maybe I'll use a lot of eccentric tempos. And then in the exploit phase, like now we're going to really exacerbate or exploit the stretch shortening reflex. So altitude lands, true plyometrics, band accelerated plyos, things like that. So I'm always thinking about like what are we trying to develop right now that's going to set us up for the next block. And it's not the exercises, it's just what the exercises are accomplishing. So from a reactivity standpoint, like if we're trying to build up to plyos, like you got to start somewhere. So I always start with like multi-directional omniplanar pogo variations. That's bilateral, unilateral. It's also reactionary. I'll do a lot of stuff like that where I'm not giving them a predetermined direction to move. And then like in our intensification block right now, we're doing depth jumps. And now, people will say, oh, like Verkhoshansky's books and like all his models of laying out plyometrics, have depth jumps last, like in his progression. And I'm over here like, well, you have to bridge into that somehow, some way. You can do a regressed version of it. So like we're doing depth jumps over hurdles right now off of like 6 to 8 DC blocks. Like that's not a tall height to drop from. So it's just like slowly adding layers to build to the final thing. And like every exercise that I program has an overarching stimulus associated with it. So whether it's hypertrophy, whether it's like maximal strength, or like just maximal motor unit recruitment. I mean, I'm going to get into overcoming ISOs really soon, to potentiate plyos and truly tap into like maximal motor unit recruitment, because I actually don't think that you experience that with heavy lifting, because as long as you're able to overcome the bar, you're not hitting as much force as you can possibly produce. So like that's another tool I use in late training phases instead of true lifting as well. So during that exploit phase as well, that's also going to be a period where like we're seriously laying on the gas with the sprint work and hitting max velocity. What do you need to run fast? You can't be super sore, you can't be super fatigued, and you have to be primed and you have to be stiff. So what I do to preserve that stuff is like you stay away from the compliant lifting and the deep lifting, and you stay away from super high system loads. You can utilize overcoming isometrics to keep your CNS primed and keep the motor units recruited and ready to go. And then you just layer in more plyometrics. What you don't do is you surf this fake force velocity curve where like you think you're hitting some like you know unique quality by lifting at zero point 0.8 meters per second. You can do that. That will reduce system load and make you feel fresher. But the real power adaptations and the real speed adaptations come when you actually do that thing and you're doing exercises that produce high RFD within 100 milliseconds. And you're doing exercises that don't take 400, 500 milliseconds for you to summate maximal force. Like you're doing much quicker things. And it's your standard vertical integration system, but I think it's as I transition through, I'm just like real much more heavily avoiding like actual authentic lifting and getting what I think is an identical training effect, just using something that's not gonna give athletes a much like more negative return on their investment and have as many negative trade-offs.
I like what you were saying there, and it brings me into a point I wanted to talk to you about. Of I think you said it, of high outputs incur high costs, and you also need a high energy bank to do them. And that was a pretty good description of what you were saying. But in your own personal training, I know you're going towards the Apex competition coming up pretty soon. And obviously, there's some pretty high outputs needed for that. Could you go through some of your own training and basically how you've taken yourself through that peak and now you're maybe laying off the gas volume wise, but these outputs just require immense energy systems to take on?
Yeah, so I put myself in a really difficult position because I got married in August, so I had to take time off from training, and that was I'm 2 days short of 2 months away from that day. So I've been training it consistently for like 7.5 weeks. So I was detrained for a little bit. I had to go through a GPP block, which was like super, super effective, I felt like. And then I got into my intensification period. And like that's around the same time I signed up for Apex. So like mentally, I'm just like stressing, trying to like, I'm like mentally, I'm like, oh my God, I got to train for a mile. Like this is going to be absolutely excruciating. So I'm now adding like 2 hours of running a week. I'm also trying to like peak my 40-yard dash and build my 40. And I learned pretty quick that like that's just not going to happen. So I actually purposely positioned my running days after my lower body strength days because I want to get used to running tired because I'm going to be running tired during this event. Like after I rip like 40 deadlifts or whatever off the floor in 60 seconds, like I'm going to have to then run. So like I don't know if that training organization was correct or not or like appropriate. I feel like it is, but um yeah, I'm adding a lot of novelty because I'm not an endurance athlete. Um, and I'm also trying to intensify everything. So I went through this little intensification period where I really was getting like smashed by my training and started having conversations with some people like, Blaine, Will, Tim, and also Cody Bidlow. You might know him, Athlete X. So him and I are talking, and he's like, you should probably ditch like all this heavy lifting. It does like if you ditch your lifting, that like the problem I've fallen into is like I come back to that exercise and mentally I'm like I've lost strength. But you haven't because like the main predicator I think of strength is like how much ground reaction force you can actually generate. And especially in the task of sprinting, like that's a huge predetermining factor of how well you're going to run. And I just shifted my focus in the last week. And like just after 1 week of a little bit more novelty, like doing box squats, doing more plyos, doing less traditional lifting, like I'm already feeling so fresh and like so ready to go. And I think part of that was just reducing my overall training load and just two, giving my body some variability and manipulating the constraints I talked about before, manipulating the range of motion, manipulating the frequency of how often I was training, how often I was running, um, and things like that. So, yeah, my outputs have gotten significantly greater. I mean, I was doing weight releaser squats with like 455 at the bottom, like isometric pause at the bottom, and then letting it go. Like, that's a super intense training effect. Um, and I don't know what, like I know this deep down, but I do it anyway because I'm an idiot and I just want to be like the best performer in this competition. Like I know that you probably shouldn't be doing AEL and also running miles and training for your 40 at the same time. But my dumb ass just does it anyway. So I have to just bring like, grab myself by the, take the reins and just say like you can't do this right now. And I might lose strength in those exercises, but it doesn't mean that systemically I'm a weaker person. You know,
When
it
how
it,
long you got till the competition?
it's on October 26th, so I've got 12
Oh,
days.
damn, it's coming up here. Are you
Yeah.
traveling down there and doing it?
Yeah.
Okay, hell yeah, dude.
Yeah.
That's
Austin,
So
gonna
are
be
you
my
Austin, are you going?
no. Not yet, dude.
I
I
think
I will compete next year. I got to snatch 315. That's what I gotta lock in for that, bro. I'm already
I I think I'm going
myself.
to crush the med ball throw. The broad jump, I think I'm going to get like 11 feet. I've been doing 10 feet 11 inches for the last like 3 weeks. I can't break it, but with some adrenaline, I'm going to get 11 feet.
Easy.
My vert, I think, will be really good. And my 40, if I play my cards right the next 2 weeks, is going to be solid. If it's in the 4.5s, I'll be happy. I ran a 4.67 the other day, and that was feeling like absolute dog water at like 4:30 in the morning. Um, and my best 40 ever is like 4.58. So I'm feeling pretty confident about that. and my bench on my mile is where I'm going to make up a lot of my like that's what I need to focus on for the next like 2 weeks if I can. If I can do it more intelligently, I think that's going to help my score the most.
What's the mile
But
PR sitting at?
I did a 90% effort mile the other day. It's at 650. So, I mean, my heart rate wasn't even above like 183, 184 for that. Like when I go to Apex, I'm going to be running my like as hard as I possibly can. Obviously, like within reason, so I don't gas out. I don't want to burn out, but I will be running at like hopefully a 5:45 pace.
Tristan, did you have a sick high school mile?
It was probably in the low fives. I never ran, but I just like watching right now the opposite problem that I had because I was like a cyclist for a while of incorporating lifting into like 20 hours of endurance training. I was like, how do I do this? Well, I do it. And now watching lifters being like, I don't know how I'm possibly going to incorporate 90 minutes to 2 hours of running per week. It's unfeasible.
Tristan's like, I'm on a fucking bike for 20 hours a week, bro.
Yeah, well, I'm also relying heavily on the rower, the ski, and the assault bike to condition myself and just rip those and try to take off impact. I'm probably gonna do that instead of like I was running repeat 200s on my upper body day. 'Cause, like my week goes acceleration, lower body strength, upper body strength, recovery, max V plus lower again, and then Saturday is like conditioning plus upper body like armor building day. So I was doing my repeat 200s to prepare for the mile on Wednesday before my recovery day, but I'm not recovered enough by Friday to run fast.
Is this the first time
So
you've like taken long distance running kind of serious?
I did last year for a little bit because my wife at the time was like big into running, so we would do it here and there, and I was enjoying it, but like I got shin splints. Like I didn't know what I was doing. You know what I mean?
Have you,
So
I wonder, have you noticed an impact on the other qualities of training improve like for the benefit, improving your cardiovascular system if this is one of the first times like kind of touching it?
yeah, well, I mean, I definitely noticed a change in my sleep quality and my HRV. Like acutely, it like if you do a really intense conditioning bout, like your HRV is probably going to be down that next day if you are new to it. But like over time, you're going to experience like yeah, an uptick, and I feel overall better. My appetite's better. Um, my sleep is more restful, and I feel like I'm like just more complete human being, to be honest. Like just take training aside, like I feel like I'm just a healthier person. Um, so those are the things, and like only acutely do I feel like it negatively impacts my speed. If I were to take like a break from it, like I don't think it would impact my speed. I've continued to get faster and faster. Um, but I'm not running that much, so like I can't really speak for like higher volumes, but I really don't feel like I'm experiencing any kind of like long-term interference effect right now.
Yeah, dude, we have an ultra runner that trains at our gym, Mark Dowdall, and it's kind of cool because his running form from college completely shift, bro. It's so funny, like watching him run, like how much his feet just plop on the ground because he runs like 200-mile races, but he is about like he has worked his way back up to pretty much being the same speed he was in college, like when he was just an
Hmm.
outside linebacker. It's kind of cool to like watch the body completely adapt, run in a completely different way, and then if you still give it the stimulus it needs, it will kind of find a way to like make that motor work.
Yeah, it will. It will. I'm not really concerned with my running training right now impacting my speed long term. I don't think I ever will because I'll never like give it enough attention or effort, I think, for that to even happen.
Oh, yeah. One of the things I want to draw back to is you were talking about cutting your traditional lifting down, and you also talked about compressive versus expansive athletes. And you talked about the compressive athletes like maybe not responding as well to some of the expansive type stuff, which I think is something that's not talked about kind of enough in the field. We always talk about expansive based athletes like not doing well at compression, but we never really talk about the other way around. Have you found that with some of your squatty or compressive based athletes? Because I have fallen into that rabbit hole before where I really was eating up the essentials of like the elastic essentials type stuff, the like really doing hard plyometrics, really sprinting, really taking a lot of lifting stuff. And honestly, I just started feeling super weak. And like I'm the same way if it comes to like a deload week. Like I just start to feel like a shell of myself. And all I have to do is add in like some squats or some deadlifts. and it completely changes. I get all the benefits of what I was doing before, and I don't feel like a shell. It's a super weird feeling. And I've had the same thing with some squatty athletes when I was obsessed about all the plyos. They kind of had the same thing. Like I kind of feel like a little bit weaker with a lot of my like pushing stuff. Like, and they're so earth bending base that like they lost the strength that they were good at. And then all of my long athletes were like, this is the best program ever. This is amazing. Like I'm getting stronger, I'm running faster, and I'm jumping higher. Have you like found that balance?
Yeah, so there's two important things I want to say here. The first is that elastic athletes struggle like we'll use expansive and compressed like you said just to keep the terminology the same. The expansive athletes struggle more with the compressive stuff than the compressive athletes struggle with the expansive stuff.
Mm.
I've noticed that across the board 90% of the time that's what I'm seeing. The other thing that I want to say is like I've felt the same thing that you felt, but I think I did it wrong. And like, I'm not saying that you're doing it wrong either, but like it's just an idea that I've applied more. Like when I take the heavy lifting away and I feel that like subjective sense of getting weaker or like maybe my propulsive impulse goes down on the force plates. Like now that I'm incorporating the overcoming isometrics more and I'm still stimulating that same quality, I haven't experienced the same drop off that I used to when I would just do like speed lifting or like drop catch back squats or like, drop catch Bulgarians. I think people like us still need like Olympic lifts, overcoming ISOs, things like that, which are still like super high force, but just not as much like grindy, not as grindy lifts as what we're used to. And it's always good to go back to it because it makes us feel good. Like psychologically, I think that's a big component of it too that we forget. Like psychologically, it feels good and it positions athletes in like to feel confident and like they're ready. So that's something I've noticed too is like the compressed athletes, for them to feel prepared and feel good, they want that stuff.
Mm.
So just balancing it a little bit more, I think, is something that we should focus on. Um, the one thing that I find like consistently that the compressed athletes struggle with too is like single leg jumping,
Yep.
hopping, bounding, skipping. Unless it's like a pure like single leg box jump, like that's super hard. Like true single leg plyos, they struggle with a lot. And I think part of it has to do with how they're with their pelvis shape. Like if you have like a wider pelvis, like your hip joints are going to be further outside of your center of mass, so like that might have something to do with it. I think with females, like you have a larger Q angle, that might have something to do with it. Like when they hit the ground, their foot's not right beneath their center of mass. It's kind of like inside their base of support a little more, or I'm sorry, their trunk is outside their base of support. So that's something I notice a little bit more. Um, but yeah, I like if you were to watch me hop, it's not great. Like it's gotten better, but I've had to train myself to be good at it, and it requires a lot of compensations for me to be good at it. Like I have to rotate my trunk a ton when I go to put my foot down because like if I stay straight on, I'm going to feel off balance, and my body wants to naturally rotate one way. Um, yeah, single leg jumping is a thing they struggle with. I've been able to like teach the compressed athletes who aren't like super bouncy, like how to be bouncier. I think a big like part of that is teaching them like faster eccentric braking skills. That's something that I think they don't excel at, and that's why they're not good at top speed because they can't accept high forces fast. So that's a big area that I've focused on. Um, but yeah, I've seen some of the similar things that you have with that for sure.
Yeah, dude, the one-legged hopping was the biggest at ever, bro. There's nothing that makes me feel like it irrationally makes me mad, and I keep forcing myself to do it because I suck at it so bad. I'm like,
Well,
dude,
let me
every
let
time
me
I make a
let
YouTube
me ask
video
you
on
this.
that, I'm like, I just start yelling at the camera. I'm like, I hate myself.
Let me ask you this. I would bet that one foot of yours is like solid and the other's really bad.
Yeah, my left foot's really good. My right foot is terrible.
Same, yeah.
Dude,
Yeah,
your
same.
standing triple jumps are really good, Austin. I
Bro,
love
my
seeing
standing triple
this.
jumps make me actually want to shoot myself. It's so frustrating. And it's so weird because I'm a like jumping, like if I were to dunk, I like jumping 1 foot off my left leg. But if I was trying to go off my right leg, bro, there's absolutely no way. But my
So
1 foot
when
dunk
you
is way better than my 2 foot dunk.
when you triple jump, what foot do you jump off single leg first?
I believe I go left, right, left.
Really?
I think.
Okay.
I would have to watch
So,
watch the camera, but if I'm thinking in my head, I would go left, right, left, I think. Not positive
well,
there
so
though.
hold on. It's a triple jump, broad jump to a single leg 2 foot land. Or are you doing, am I getting confused with what a triple jump is?
Yeah, Austin, I don't think you touch. I think you do each leg once, don't you? In your videos, I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry,
you.
I'm thinking like the cycle, like the triple,
Uh,
like the single leg triple, like
Got
where
it.
you stay on the
Okay.
same
Okay.
leg. But yeah, I still, oh fuck, I would have to look. I would have to look at what I do.
So for me, every time I do it, I always go broad jump, right, left, 2 foot land. And the reason for that is because I think like your body prefers to take on that second single leg jump with the stronger leg. Like if I were to ever jump out, do left leg and then right and crash down on my right leg after building all that momentum after the broad jump and that first single leg jump, I would not jump as far. My
No, now
triple
that you're
jumps are
saying that,
always
I absolutely do that with my left. I absolutely use the left
yeah,
leg to take off for that second jump. Yeah, you're so right.
yes, yeah.
That's so. And one of the things too you talked about was the adding the Oli lifts into something a program like this. So like when I was talking about this, I went 12 weeks no barbell. Like that was the whole like kind of challenge of that program. And I think Olympic lifts would have been the perfect. And all I did when I was done with the 12 weeks, I started to feel like a shell. I added in like 2 days of like just touching a barbell, and I noticed all of the increases I probably got from the previous 12 weeks happen within 2 weeks. Like it was an instant shift. But the
Right.
doing the Oli lifts at like a non-grindy, because I also believe there's a big difference between doing Oli lifts at like 70 to even like 85-ish to 90-ish% versus 90 plus. Like 90 plus, it turns into some grindy, like almost like
Hmm.
a back squat type lift versus when if you're staying at that 70 to like 85%, I think you could feel so amazing as a compressive athlete doing like a sprint based program with some 70 to 85% ish Oli lifts in there touched.
100%. Yeah, right now I'm powering all of my cleans.
Mm.
I'm doing like clean pull plus a power clean complex on like today's lift. And then on my day 2 right now, I'm doing a hip clean, which demands you have to go a little lighter. A hip clean is pretty snappy and it's like straight from your pockets with like no counter movement. You kind of just like sink the bar down. And then I pair that with a hang clean. So I go hip clean, hang power. And I'm just trying to be as snappy as I possibly can with it.
Dude, do you have I want to hear your thoughts on that. Like the feeling of that snap, like when you're doing it. What do you think that is? Like where you leave the weight room, if I'm touching like today's lift, I was doing I think it was like 75% snatches, 80% cleans, and you leave the weight room leave like a freaking you feel like a man, bro. Like you want to hit like a softball the farthest you've ever hit one. You want to like sprint, you feel so much better than if you push those percentages higher. And it's something very specific for me about those Oli lifts at those lighter percentages. Not where it's too light where there's no intent, but man, there's something about that twitch that it gives you when you leave the weight room. Like have you experienced that? Like what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can't really explain it, but it just feels smooth. It just feels like everything's working as it should. And it's I think it's like the ultimate expression of being as coordinated as you can be, um, and express like force super fast. I don't know why it feels so good. Maybe just feel you're just like dominating the weight and it's like just feeling easy and it's just a confidence builder. I don't know what it is, but it does feel you can't negate the feeling of what it gives you, the feeling it gives you.
Yeah, well,
I've
and that's
felt the
like
same
people make
thing.
fun of primers like all the time. And I was like, in some regard, I can, but I'm like, dude, I've done some things in the weight room before I go and play, and it 100% helps me. It
Yeah.
100% does something where it's a performance enhancer.
Yeah, 100%. Well, some primers are just like eyewash, though. Like at the same time, like some primers are like, okay, we're not going to lift. We're going to do like foam rolling and like mobility and med ball throws, and it's like, well, med ball throw is just like an expression of power. It's not really like it's pretty easy to do. I don't know if it's going to ramp your system up. Like, I mean, my favorite primer is sprinting. Like the day prior before a game or 2 days out, but it's got to be at least a little challenging. I mean, it's got to be something where like it cognitively it makes you feel like you're like you actually have something that's challenging enough in front of you to where you feel prepared as well. Like you can actually sense it, and it's like it's actually contributing to like your flow state and how you're mentally approaching it. I don't know if you're going to achieve that by just doing easy stuff.
Yeah, it's just a little like RPR, and then you're good, dude. That's all you need. Well, too
Yeah.
would love it. uh,
I,
Last kind of topic of the podcast I want to cover with you is your pragmatic coaching and your course and your like the teaching aspect of like teaching other coaches. What does that look like for you? What are your philosophies there? What have you learned from like teaching other coaches? I think there's a definite like different skill set in like coaching athletes and then coaching other coaches and the thought processes that go behind it and just how I don't know, for me it makes me such a significantly better coach putting all of my thoughts together to be able to teach somebody else that needs to be taught it. And then I can go to an athlete. I'm like, well, this is the easiest thing ever because I've spent 6 hours actually talking about these ideas. And now I can dwindle it down into what you guys need to understand and feel. But has it helped your communication abilities? What have you learned from that process? And what's it look like for you?
Yeah, it's helped my communication a lot. It's helped me understand topics better. Um, the way that it started, the course itself, like I asked myself, like, what was every single problem I was having when I was coming up as a young coach? Like, what were all the issues I was having? What were all the things that I was overthinking about? And I was overthinking about the bilateral versus unilateral. How am I going to write a 4 week program when we have games every single week? Things like that. And it's hard to cover like a lot of the philosophies I go into, but like pretty much the entire message of the course is to like be a better thinker, have like more of a like a philosophical approach to your coaching. So an example of that, I really like this this principle that I went into in the very first module, and I'm sure you've heard it before, but it's Occam's razor. Occam's razor states that the most simple explanation is probably the most likely reason for why you're seeing what you're seeing. And I like that razor, that idea, because we attribute the wrong things to certain results we see all the time. And we like reach for things, or we attribute way too much value to certain things over others, and we get lost in the sauce. And also, this is actually like a little sidebar here. Coaches like to scapegoat us, and we have to be able to understand what is the reason for why we lost 5 games in a row. It's probably not because, my hour total of training over the last week that you've given me because 19 hours are being used on the field and I'm only getting an hour. There's no way that overtrained the athletes. So, like, if you're able to understand like the most simple reason to explain everything, it's going to be way easier to feel confident in what you're doing as well. And that's something that I think people struggle with as well, is just having confidence behind their decisions. And that's where we get into hyper analyzing everything and also like losing respect and not being able to communicate effectively to people that we work under or the athletes that we work with. Like I got asked the other day, like, why do we do altitude lands? Like, this is doing nothing. I'm like, have you ever gotten hurt moving slow? Like, ever. So it's just like simple rationale for stuff. That's a very reductionist like explanation there, but that was pretty much the root of my explanation. But um another message that I gave in that course was like program in sprints. Like, you don't have to have 4 weeks of training laid out. And what I actually gave my course members is something that I called an intermittent variation template, which is an Excel template I made, which has four weeks on it. There's 2 weeks on each sheet, and it's a front and back sheet. So the template allows you to change exercises, weight, intensity, reps, your RIR, your velocity, number of sets, whatever you want to do every single week. So what I do now is I use that template and I approach every single week all season long like it's its own program.
Mm.
And I pretty much like, you'll see coaches, oh, we're in season, so we're just going to transition to an in-season program. And I'm like, that's a terrible idea. You're going to peak in April or March when you need to peak in June. So like I go through a section in that course where I talk about like, okay, in this phase of the year, we're in tournament play. We're only playing on weekends. That means we're training our ass off every single Tuesday and Wednesday. We're going to go light on Thursday, be ready for the weekend. And then when we get into, midweek games, which start in March, now we're going to transition into something a little different where we're respecting the schedule, letting those games come first, and structuring everything around those. Then you go into conference play. Now you don't play as many midweek games. How are you going to approach that? Now we're in the middle of the season again. might need to retouch some volume. You could revisit that on your Tuesday lifts so that athletes are fresh for that weekend. So it's just maximizing every day you have and like ditching just blanket statements like, oh, we're in season, we're going to change to something completely different. And then you miss out on valuable training and like the greatest training response you can possibly attain. So I try to get people to look much more short term and much more acutely into what's going on instead of like retrospectively planning everything. And then I also go into like a lot of like technology that we have as accessible to us and like how to actually use it, like not like a charlatan and like not rely on it. Because you definitely can be married to a lot of this stuff and like certain tools are great for certain things and not others. So I help people just work through that thought process. Um, and I do think like in this first rendition of the course, I was pretty redundant and it was a little too long. It was like 22 hours long, and I did like live lectures every week for 12 weeks. So like it gets long. You get Q&As and stuff like that. But I want to be much more succinct next year in the next cohort, and show more like real life practical examples of what I actually spoke about because this was more like theoretical and just like thinking systems type education where I did give a lot of examples of what I actually do, but it could go a little deeper into like where to put in certain things. Like people are asking me like, okay, where do you put eccentrics? Where do you put isometrics? Where do you put all, and like they want to know how it's actually utilized when like my biggest thing is like I want to teach them how to think about where it should be placed. Like I'd rather not show people that. So like that's a mental hurdle I want to get over too is like, do I tell people where I do all this stuff or do I stick to the main message of like form a better way to actually understand what it is you want to implement and then where it fits based on that. Like altitude lands are going to produce what, like 8,000, 9,000 newtons of force. Like if you know that, it's kind of easy to like determine number one, where you shouldn't do those, like in your training year. And that's another thinking concept I gave people in the course is like, you need to always start with what you should not do.
Mm.
And that helps to narrow your focus a lot more and to make a better decision. So now when I sit down and make a program, I start with what would be a god awful idea right now? And then that helps me weed out a ton of stuff. Okay, like if altitude lens are a really bad idea in week one of training from like a 60-inch box, like what else might fall into a similar category as altitude lens? Max velocity sprinting, plyometric bounding, like I mean that's like easy stuff that I feel like everyone knows shouldn't be done in week one unless you're like a super trained athlete. But yeah, long-winded answer just to say like I'm trying to get people to just form better thoughts and like filter through like a better thought process in a day and age where people just like put out an Instagram post and they're like, we do this. And it's like, well, why, how, when, and where? You know what I mean? Like, I don't really care that you do it. Like we all do that, but how does it fit into the big like the grand scheme of things is kind of what I'm trying to get after. And it's now evolved into a community where I've got guest speakers coming on. And you're actually someone whose name I wrote down to get in there and talk about your little game, your games you do with your athletes.
That'd be
So we can
sick.
have that conversation eventually. But yeah, that's pretty much the message of the course.
I like how you definitely took the binary answer out. Like when someone just said like, "Oh, what like I want to do this when." It's like that depends on so many factors, and I think that was a thing of like, "Oh, this is preseason, this is in season, this is off season." And like the day my season starts, like I have to completely shift everything I do is definitely a methodology that wouldn't work with almost any team or any individual, but yet that's what people think needs to happen. And there's definitely a Venn diagram for each of these seasons with an overlap, and I think you laid that out beautifully right there.
The first month of my competitive season with my teams is one of the hardest training months of the entire year
Mm.
because like that's when they're going to be the most fresh. So like people need to understand that too is like you need to strike when the iron's hot. And like that's my big philosophy with that is this is the best chance I'm going to have. So I need to layer this in right now as best I possibly can. And obviously, it demands communication. Your coaching staff has to be on the right page with you and understand what you're doing and know what to expect and know how hard they can push athletes as well, which is sometimes a shot in the dark with a lot of staffs. I just, you guys know how it is, but as best you can, you have to just know the situation. Like I know at the end of the fall season, like stress is gonna accumulate and then they're gonna have finals, and that's gonna be a difficult time to train. Like you're summating stress throughout the entire fall. They want to go home for winter break. They have finals. Psychologically, they're out of it. You're not gonna get much done. So like I'm crushing them when I can. Not like killing them, but like you know what I mean. Like I'm delivering the most profound training effect I possibly can when I think it's the most opportunistic time to do so.
And I think one of the cool things that you kind of see with coaches like yourself, it's like once you have the easy part figured out, like bringing it back to the start of the podcast where we are talking about how programming can become easy once you don't get lost in the methods, don't get lost in the tools, right? And I think so many coaches spend so much of their brain energy on those small specific things that they miss the bigger question of, okay, when can I train them? When are they going to give me intense? Like, what are they going to feel like there? And it's like you have this perfect program on paper that you like, these are good intended coaches. Like they spent a lot of time on this thing. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter because it's not the real life with those athletes. And you spent so much time in places, and I think a lot of it's probably a control piece too, of like you can control fully that part of your programming and that part of like your input on it. And there's a little bit of a black and white and gray area when there comes to when do they want to go home? When are they going to give you intent? What are they going to feel like in the season? And they're more open-ended questions and it's more the art of coaching and the painting when it comes to coaching rather than the science based, like, or strictly science based, where you're just typing in a computer and you're making everything pretty. But I think when coaches don't have a system around these things, they spend too much energy in the wrong spots.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is like more so than the methods is just the overall stress that you're delivering. Um, and like I look at every single week and every single training day as just a way to get the athlete to handle more and more stress. And where I'm going to be able to maximize that, that's super, super important to isolate those days and construct everything around that. Like I know from like, here's a good way to use force plate data. Like that isn't dumb.
Tristan's
Like
gonna
if
love this.
you're going to notice over time testing your athletes what days they're the hottest. I have days where my entire team, I can almost guarantee that 95% of them are going to be operating close to their best. Just based off circadian rhythms, the how every single practice week works for us, like just the schedule and like what's typical for us, and like just the trends I've seen. And over the years, I have moved training days around to actually accommodate for when I know they're going to be ready. Like that's, I think, a pretty smart way to use that information if it's consistent. And I'm 3 years into looking at force plate data with this program, and it's the same days every single year. And like it's because why? Because travel happens on the same days when you come back from games. Your off days on the same day every single week, most of the time, like stuff like that. So when are your athletes fresh from all that stuff? From all those external stressors, like when are they ready for a true stimulus, and then giving them that dose on those days. So that's one thing. But yeah, you got to be like in tune with things like that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Well, I appreciate you coming on and taking the time to do this with us. When is the next course starting? Like when can people look for that?
The cohort's going to be next July, probably
Oh,
next
a little
July
bit.
or August. Like I rushed myself this past year. I'm not going to do that this year. So it's going to be either July or August.
Hell yeah, dude. Well, I
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on and ripping with us.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate you having me on. Thanks, Tristan.
Thank you guys for listening. Keep chopping wood.
Thank you for listening. Join us next week as we dive down another rabbit hole. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating. Follow us on Instagram at Austin Jochum to stay updated on future podcast guests. Keep chopping wood.